Statistics, and I want to just look into the numbers and statistics right now. Ma'am, I mean, we know that in 2021, the World Economic Forum put out a global gender gap report. That report had some numbers that did not look so well when it comes to the global gender pay gap, for example. We're looking at an estimation of 16%, which means that on average, women are earning only 84 cents, not percent, 84 cents for every dollar earned by men. And these figures haven't been looking good even with time, despite the fact that there have been numerous, sittings, numerous organizations to try and look into this. How does this make you feel, first of all, and what is being done to try and close on this gap, for example?
It energizes me. It energizes me because it makes us work harder. It makes me mad as hell. It shouldn't be. There must be a pay equity in private sector. But to me, it energizes me. It reminds me how much work there is to do. There's a UN Women report that also says that if we continue at the pace at which we are at now, it's going to take us 130 years before we reach gender equity. We don't have 130 years. But I'm glad you mentioned that World Economic Forum report of 2021. You'll notice when they rank the top countries in achieving gender equity, Namibia is number 6 globally. Rwanda is number 7 globally. So to have 2 African countries in the top 10 global performers for gender equality really says this isn't an African problem. This is a global problem. So it really reminds us that this is an attitude problem that we have across the world, and Africa is taking a lead in showing how it can be done.
Right. I mean, if we move away from the numbers in terms of the pay, there is still another area where there's still inequalities being looked at, and that is the limited political representation. We have continued to see, especially during the photo op, which took place just the other day at the African Union Summit, which you are there. And every time you look at that picture of all the African presidents, what does it make you feel? Because some people say you'd have to zoom to be able to see any woman on that particular picture. And most of the times you might not probably see, a number that would make you smile. What does this make you feel, and what do you think should be done to ensure that there's more women in positions of leadership, like the presidential level, to be able to spur this kind of change that you're trying to push as First Ladies?
The problem is in the pipeline. It's incredibly hard for women to become parliamentarians, to become governors, to become local authority leaders. And we can't do this without quotas. Namibia implemented quotas and went from a 27% parliamentary representation of women to 44%. That was a significant jump. Recently at Namibia's party elections, our next presidential candidate is going to be a woman. The likelihood that Namibia will produce a female president for 2025 is high. Actually, we're quite certain of it. We're a democratic country, but the ruling party remains quite strong. So Namibia will at least contribute a female president in 2025. But your question remains correct. In 2023, when we look at a list of African presidents, and we only see one female president from Tanzania, there's a female president from Ethiopia, it does make us pause. We had Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who was the first democratically elected female president on the continent. And she's obviously served her term, and she's doing spectacular work through her foundation. But the question is, what is stopping us from female representation in politics at the highest level? And I think it's got a lot to do with how our politics are organized. It's got a lot to do with how our societies think about women. And it's also got a lot to do about how expensive it is to become a politician on our continent. And generally, where the money is where the men are. So when a woman is running, it's not so easy for her to mobilize financial resources. But it's also mindset changes. It's also the need for quotas. It's also the need to make sure that we keep women in politics, that we get them into politics, that they're willing to stay as well. We've seen globally, we've seen the Irish Prime Minister, it was the Scottish Prime Minister, the New Zealand Prime Minister, both saying, I've had enough, I'm out. So it's also difficult for women to be willing to remain in politics just because of its very nature. So there's structural reform that has to happen in our political and social organizations.
Right. I mean, it's a conversation that I'd love to have with you, even just specifically on this one, so we have more time to actually delve even deeper. But because of time, I want us to look at the issue of the SCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Just the other day, the heads of states of the members of the African Union were meeting under the theme acceleration of the implementation of FCFTA. Look, it beats logic to see this as a theme, and the question that comes to mind is, isn't the sound of the drums of the importance of the SCFTA's full implementation not loud enough for leaders to come up with a whole session just to remind them of the need to accelerate the implementation of the SCFTA? I mean, from where you sit as the First Lady, I mean, where do you see the level of commitment by the African leaders to spur or to spearhead the fast implementation? Because some people are losing hope. They're feeling that this is all talk. I mean, when do we see the fruits of this? And most of the people who might also benefit more are the women, who are mostly traders, cross-border traders. I mean, what does this make you feel, first of all?
I've actually been, I was pleased that was the theme, because to me it shows political consideration to how important an accelerator AfCFTA is. I've also been pleasantly surprised by the thoughtfulness of how AfCFTA can and should represent female entrepreneurs. I think maybe a missing conversation is really when we're talking about the movement of goods, we also talk about the movement of people, and we need to be mindful that when it comes to the movement of people that will be facilitated through AfCFTA is the issues of human trafficking and how it impacts women. So your first question of representation is important, because we need women at the table who remind leaders on any policy, whether it's AfCFTA or any other policy, of how they can have detrimental impact on women. But I think the principle of the theme of the AU being AfCFTA, I think it was correct. It's an incredible accelerator, and we do need to get women more economically empowered.